Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, the idea of a flexible working model and how the business ecosystem is evolving as a result is a big topic. And today's guest is Jay Kulkarni from a company called Theorem. And he is going to unpack what it really means for the future of business. And he will also share takeaways from his perspective on what it took to found and evolve his own company over the past year, his inspirational story, and also share how he spent the past year learning how to play the piano, and hopefully share a few tips on why learning a new skill in later life doesn't have to be that burden that it seems. And at a time where I think at the beginning of lockdown, we all wanted to learn a language, an instrument or something, Jay's actually gone out there and done it. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. But buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to New Jersey, where Jay is waiting to speak with us. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Jay. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Neil, thanks for having me, and it's good to be on the chat with you. I'm Jay Kulkarni. I run Theorem. We're a marketing services company. I'm based in New Jersey. A little bit about myself. I'm an immigrant, grew up in India, came to the US as a student, been here about 30 years. And I worked in DoubleClick as one of my first jobs when I was in the US after I finished grad school. And that's how I entered the media marketing industry.
Wow. Well, there's a question I always like to begin the podcast with is ask the guests to share their origin story. And you've already given me a few little teasers there that suggest that there was an amazing and inspiring story behind your journey. But can you remember where your passion for tech came from and what it was that put you on this path?
Yeah, so I have an engineering degree from India. And when I immigrated to the US, it was in the early to mid 90s. And that was the beginning of the internet. I was just, bitten by the bug of how this technology was evolving. And I just knew that I wanted to work in this very fast evolving industry. It was the pre-dot-com boom days, and it was very, very early. And a recruiter asked me if I wanted to speak to an internet advertising company. And I went in, I interviewed, and believe it or not, because of my engineering degree, they asked me to do tech support in the early days. It was very early days. I was probably employee 40 or something. As startups go, it was a very scrappy startup. DoubleClick was in those days. And for the record, that's the only real job I've had. So I worked at DoubleClick, went on to build their products across advertiser, publisher, email products, had a great time. And after 5 years there, I quit to start Theorem in my spare bedroom in New Jersey. So that's the short version of a 5-7 year journey.
Wow, what an amazing journey you've been on there. And like you said, that path led you to Theorem, which is an innovation and engineering firm. But can you tell me a little bit more about what it is that you do, how you help businesses, the kind of problems you solve, etc.?
Yeah, happy to. So Theorem operates at the intersection of media, technology, and marketing. So that's the intersection we operate in. We work with pretty much all of the large platforms. MarTech, we're a certified Salesforce partner. We work with other marketing cloud platforms in the MarTech world. So we touch that universe. We are very deep in social, programmatic, analytics, and creative. So what we bring to the table is a very holistic set of service offerings. And the value we bring to our clients are twofold. We help them with customer acquisition and retention at scale, and we do that leveraging process automation. So as you may imagine, in this world where things are moving at a rapid scale, we work with large publishers like New York Times. Since you're from London, we service clients like Dennis Publishing and Haymarket in the UK. We have clients all over the world. So we work with publishers, and we also work with media and entertainment companies that stream audio and video. We work with large retailers and D2C. And the challenge in this very fast evolving marketplace, they all have, is how do you acquire customers at scale and how do you retain them to have an ongoing relationship? So we help them in those two fronts.
And before we started recording today, we were both chatting about how much we miss travel and that travel corridor opening up between the US and UK again is something we've both been looking forward to. And there's also a lot of talk at the moment around flexible and a more hybrid approach to working. So I'm curious, what do you think about this idea of the flexible working model and how that business ecosystem is evolving and what it really means for the future of business?
Yeah, it's a deep question, many layers to it. So I'll put it in context, very purely from a Theorem perspective. We have teams all around the world. I'm based in the US. We have teams in London. We have teams in Australia, Sydney. We own and operate our own operations in southern India, in Bangalore and Mysore. We have teams in the Dominican Republic. When the pandemic broke, we used to have teams working from offices. So very quickly, we had to implement business continuity protocols, both to manage the business deliverables, but also manage the health and safety of our teams. And very proud of the work the teams have done. And we managed to do and navigate that in the last 6, 8, 10 months. And that's still an ongoing journey. As we went through that process, we've always been in touch with our teams, which brings me to the second part of your questions, which is the flexible workforce. If you look at one of the major challenges in the media and the tech industry is the acquisition and retention of talent at scale. And that's hard because you are finding that their value systems have changed and evolved in the last 10, 15 years. And I think it's a positive in the medium to longer term, once the dust settles with the short-term protocols with COVID. In the medium to longer term, what will happen is with the flex and work from home, the availability of talent actually for business increases globally. If you look at the US, the majority of the concentration of tech was obviously in Silicon Valley, parts of the East Coast, same with London. But as people move and work from home from the suburbs, the overall talent pool and access to talent increases for both, for the businesses and the opportunities for folks to subcontract and work on a flex basis at the individual level. That's one. The second is we invest a lot of training and development in our teams. The ability for self-learning and self-development in tech and media has actually become a lot more affordable, a lot more accessible and easy. So if you combine them both in the mid to longer term, flex work is actually very good for the individual and for the business. I think the burden is more on the business, how they adapt, how they manage culture, how they hire and retain talent. So the typical HR and the talent management systems that exist in both at Theorem and other companies that we work with, that needs to be changed and transformed and to become more flexible so that we're able to attract and retain talent. So that's a long-winded answer, but that's a very complex question that we are still unpacking.
No, that's a perfect answer there. And of course, MarTech is also an incredibly popular topic right now. And a lot of businesses are looking to bounce back and are working differently and re-exploring what the future of work will look like. So how do you think today's publishers, brand marketers, and indeed advertisers can better leverage the marketing cloud and programmatic tech to rise to the next level? Right.
Like I mentioned at Theorem, we are very deeply immersed in those ecosystems and platforms and technologies. So the way we look at MarTech, it is very compelling for ongoing client or customer communication. And programmatic and social is very good for new customer acquisition. Yes, there is overlap between the two, but when we step back and think of how programmatic works within these walled gardens, the ability for us to acquire customers at that point of interest and buying behavior, programmatic lends itself well. When I say programmatic, it's very holistic, whether it's display on the DSPs and the SSPs. So that's on the customer acquisition side. But once you acquire a customer and you have a relationship, that's where we at Theorem help implement, configure, architect, marketing cloud and MarTech systems. So you have their profiles, you know what they're interested in, and you can throttle the communication you want with customers based on their engagement with your product and or service. As we've seen in the last couple of years, there's a heightened level of sensitivity from the end customer about privacy, about respect for data, and how often they want to be reached out to. So it's very sophisticated MarTech systems can be engineered to be respectful of that one-to-one personalized communication on how that customer, you could have, let's say, 1 million customers, but each one of them wants to be spoken to a different way. So some of these platforms that we have expertise in allow it to be configured and architected in different ways. So from our standpoint, programmatic and social and search are great for customer acquisition, while marketing cloud and MarTech are great for ongoing communication.
And there are also a lot of conversations around third-party cookies right now, with Apple's new privacy approach, and also Google declaring the end of the third-party cookie, which opens up a whole other can of worms on the future there. But what do you think are the hidden benefits to the depreciation of that third-party cookie? And do you have any tips for marketers and publishers on better executing a transparent and effective marketing strategy?
So for the large walled gardens, you mentioned Google, and Google, I think, has extended the window by a couple of years.
Yeah,
I'll come back to that in a second. For the large walled gardens, Google, Amazon, Facebook, it doesn't really matter to them as much because you're logging in. So their email, when you log in some ways, that is their first-party cookie.
yeah.
So the impact of the deprecating of the third party would be for the small and medium businesses that need to figure out, using that 2-year window that Google has extended to, in terms of what is their strategy, how will they be transparent with their customers about data, about privacy. If you're in Europe, it's GDPR. If you're in the US, California has its own rules. So there's a lot of heavy lift from a privacy compliance and data standpoint that all businesses need to look at. And under that umbrella, because that is a very broad umbrella, under that umbrella, figure out how do they plan to reach out to their audiences and engage with them. So there's a lot of, like in any good architecture design, the discovery is probably the longest phase. So take a good amount of time to indulge in discovery, both at a macro level and at a micro level, and what it means for your business before you jump into what your first-party cookie strategy looks like and feels like. So the second part of the question was, with third-party cookie going away, I think you'll see a reemergence of the benefits of the first party, which lends itself very well to what a lot of the D2C brands are doing. The first-party cookie is more on the technology and the technical side, but if you flip that around, that's one on the business side. That's what D2C brands are doing by going direct to consumers, having that one-to-one communication. So what you're seeing is an emergence of the importance of the first-party cookie, because that's one of the reasons D2C brands are able to have that one-to-one communication. So in some ways, the D2C brands, based on their success, have established a playbook for how you can implement your first-party cookie, have your communication, and have that one-to-one brand relationship in this new paradigm.
And so much has changed in the last 2 years, and many businesses, especially the smaller to medium-sized ones, have emerged from the pandemic more resilient. They've got greater flexibility, agility, they're moving quicker. So do you have any advice for business leaders looking to learn to successfully pivot in their business strategy after years of operating under certain premises and that old way of working from the pre-pandemic era?
Right. So if you're any business, even before pre-pandemic, if it was growing and evolving, I look at businesses as organic beings. So what worked when you're, sub 1 million won't work when you cross that million, and when it crosses 10 million, whatever that range might be. So based on where the business is in its stage of evolution, even before the pandemic, it needed to be agile and flexible. I think the pandemic has accelerated the way end consumers interact with technology, and obviously its impact on societal, working norms, if you will. So you have 3 levels of complexity. One is, by itself, businesses needed to be flexible, but that has now been compounded by how the pandemic has affected you. And lastly, with the pandemic upending how traditional models work, we need to factor in technology and the regulation of it. So the way we are doing it at Theorem is baby steps. Every 2 to 3 months, we are, evaluating. Obviously, we manage the business week to week, month to month. But going back to my earlier example, we implemented business continuity protocols. We took learnings from that. We've been hybrid for the last 14, 15 months across the world. And we constantly evaluate how our teams are impacted by the last month. We take that, we have open feedback with customers, we have open feedback with teams. So we don't try to over-engineer or overreact. So the way we do it is manage and monitor month to month, quarter to quarter. And when long-term trends begin to emerge, we start to implement policies to roll it out. And obviously, we are looking for seismic shifts in the market, where that would create opportunities. So one of the things we've noticed is because of the explosion of both content streaming consumption and the boom in e-commerce, we were able to go and offer our services to retail D2C brands in a new and improved way. So there are opportunities when we see pockets, but we are being very methodical in how we are evolving the business.
And if we were to go back in time at 18 months, just about everybody I knew, and I suspect you did as well, had great plans for the lockdown. They were going to learn a new language, learn to play an instrument, and had so many big things that they wanted to tick off their to-do list. But of course, for the most part, most of us didn't do anything. But you founded and evolved your own company and also spent a year learning how to play the piano. So can you share any tips on how and why learning a new skill later in life or at any age doesn't have to be quite the burden that it seems?
Yeah. By the way, full disclosure, learning the piano is probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It is hard. I love music, and I never had a chance to learn music. And my daughter plays the piano. So we had a piano gathering dust. She's off to college. So last year in the pandemic, I found a teacher, and it's been very challenging. Even though it has been very difficult, it has also been a very good challenge. It just curiosity to learn, I guess.
Yeah.
And obviously at this stage in my life, trying to learn sheet music, coordinate the left hand and the right hand, and then it is, but you can feel, I found like a burst of energy, even though it's a lot of hard work. I look forward to the classes every week, and I'm under enormous pressure because I have a fall recital in 10 days that I need to practice for.
Oh, no. No pressure at all.
And the rest of the studio folks are probably 10 and 15 years old, and they are obviously much more faster and much more agile than me. So nothing like having young competition to keep you on your feet.
Oh, man. But you got life experience on your side to help you keep your head. A quick timeout from the interview to mention Hearst, the sponsors of the Tech Talks Daily podcast this month. So recruiters, are you or your business spending too long in your email and waiting for responses? Did you know that with HireAct, you can skip the headache of traditional hiring? You can view resumes, exchange contact info and interview candidates in seconds. You can also get curated candidate recommendations that fit your job requirements. You can chat directly with your ideal candidates, accelerate your hiring process 10 times faster than those painful traditional ways. And best of all, it's a totally free download from the Apple and Google Play Store. So download HireAct from the Apple or Google Play Store, give it a try, and let me know what you think. But now, back to today's interview. But what's next for you, and what excites you about preparing for life in 2022? Because this year's already getting towards the end. So what excites you about next year?
So funny you asked. I'm headed to Harvard Business School next week to have an executive program on entrepreneurial strategy. So I'm looking forward to that. It's a 1-week program, meet with fellow entrepreneurs who are obviously retransforming, repivoting the business. It's exciting. I still enjoy what I do. I enjoy the act of building businesses and pivoting in very tough, uncertain times. So hoping to come back from that experience, networking with other entrepreneurs and CEOs, and putting those actions and working with my teams to go on the next phase of the journey, not just in 2022, but beyond as well.
Love that. And you did mention a few moments ago you are a big music fan, and that's quite fortunate, because a question I always like to ask my guests is if there was a song or piece of music that has helped them in their career or accompanied them throughout their tech career, or just helps them get their head in the zone before a big meeting or going on stage. Is there a song and a story that you can share with us today?
I mean, there's so many songs, but my go-to would be Bohemian Rhapsody. I'm a big Freddie Mercury fan. I've been listening to it for many, many years. I just find it very inspiring. It's a very vulnerable song. Obviously, there's a piano riff, and that's my aspirational to play on my piano as well at some point. So at multiple levels, it's vulnerable. It is deep. It was his coming out song. There's great piano. There's great chords. And one of my favorite all-time rock concerts, which I could never attend, which I watch all the time on YouTube, is live at Wembley, where he just rocked. So I always go back to Bohemian Rhapsody, and I've done a lot of Freudian analysis on the lyrics, which we'll not have enough time on this podcast to get into, but happy to chat later about you if you're interested.
Oh man, that sounds like a whole episode there, deconstructing that. And as you said, a great piano riff as well. So I'd love to hear you play that one day. That's a great goal to aim for, isn't it?
Yeah, aspirational goal, absolutely.
Well, before I let you go, for anyone listening that wants to find out more information about the work you're doing and ask your team a question or anything like that, what's the best starting point?
LinkedIn. I'm there on LinkedIn with my teams. Jay Kulkarni, LinkedIn. You can look me up, Jay Kulkarni, Theorem. Hit me up. Love to connect. Love to have a conversation going. We pump out a lot of content, thought leadership. We do webinars. We do blogs. Exciting times, and love to stay in touch.
Me too. And so much I've loved about our conversation, from, yes, talking about the imminent flexible future of marketing, the role that technology will play in that. It's an incredibly exciting space to be in right now. But more than anything, I think it's your very human story that brought it to life there. So thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and share that with me. And one day, maybe we can sit down and you can play that piano riff of Bohemian Rhapsody. But thanks for joining me today.
Neil, thank you. Have a good weekend. Cheers.
I now have Bohemian Rhapsody earworm. The song is playing in repeat on my head, in particular the piano riff there that we were talking about. But what a great story. So a big thank you to Jay for sharing how today's publishers and brand marketers and advertisers can better leverage the marketing cloud and programmatic tech to rise to the next level. And also for talking about the hidden benefits to the depreciation of the third-party cookies that we keep reading about on news feeds, and for sharing a few tips on better executing a more transparent and effective marketing industry. And finally, of course, for putting us all to shame when it comes to learning a skill during lockdown. Like I said at the very beginning of the podcast, we all had big ideas, didn't we, at the beginning? But for most of us, it didn't work out. But wherever you're listening to this podcast, anywhere in the world, if you've went through the lockdown and you put that time to good use, I want to hear about it. I want to share some of those lockdown stories and how you actually made use of your time instead of watching Netflix, recording podcasts and playing Xbox like I did. So please, any questions about today's guest, to the interview, the topics we covered, or your lockdown stories and skills you learned, email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter and LinkedIn at Neil C. Hughes. And if you've still not had enough of me speaking into your ears every day and you want help writing business blogs or launching your own podcast, visit my website, techblogwriter.co.uk, where you'll also find 2,000 podcast interviews. But that's it for today, so a huge thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.